Okay then, so far we've seen that every component can have a style tag, so we can style that component, but there is one small issue with this. When we add styles in these, they don't just automatically apply to that component, they apply to every single component. So for example, this H1 selector right here, these styles will apply to this H1, but also if we have an H1 inside another component like here. So let me do that. I'm going to say modal title and save it, and this H1 style will now also apply to this right here. So let me show you that, and we can see this H1 looks exactly the same as the H1 behind. We have the underline, the font size, etc. So how do we overcome this? Well, what we could do is we could override that style inside here. So I could say now H1 over here, and that is going to have a color, and the color is going to be this hex code, which is a green color. And then I'm going to say the border is none, and then also padding of 0. So that's a different style. And if I save this now and come over here, we can see it's updated. But the bad thing is we can see it's also updated in the H1 behind it in this component. So because this style is further down in the HTML document than this one right here, it overrides it and it applies everywhere again. So this is no good. So the solution, well, there's a couple of different solutions. One solution is to say up here, I want these styles to be scoped. And if we add that scoped attribute on, it means that these styles will now only apply to whatever is in this component. And this H1 will not now affect any H1 in a different component. So let me save this and give it a whirl. We can see over here, we have the H1 style right here, which is green, but the back one is not affected. And that's because the style is now scoped to the modal component. Now, how does Vue do this? Well, if we inspect this element and go up to the head and into the styles, we can see in the second style, wherever that is, let me scroll down here to the bottom, we see another style. This is for the modal component. Notice that this H1, and in fact all of these different selectors right here, they have this data attribute as well, and it's a random data attribute. So Vue applies those data attributes to the selectors, and also it adds those data attributes to the HTML elements as well. So that's how it scopes it, because now this data attribute will not be in the H1 inside the root component, only inside this component. And that's how Vue scopes out those styles, because now it only affects the H1 with this data attribute in the style. Now, there is a slight performance hit when you do this, if you do it a lot, because Vue has to inject all of these different attributes to the different HTML elements. Now, it is very, very minimal, but I do want to show you a different way you could do this, and that is to just say over here, well, I'll make the selector more specific. So now, because we have a modal class, it's only going to apply to this H1. So you could add scoped here if you wish, and I certainly will be doing throughout the course in several occasions, but as well, you could just make the selector more specific. Also, if we go back to the app.vue file, what happens if we say that these are scoped? Well, these will then just apply to this template. Now, if I save this, watch what happens. Well, the H1 looks very strange, and the app itself is not in the middle anymore. Now, why is that? Well, it's because this selector now is no longer working, because this app div right here is not actually inside this component. It's in the index file over here. And because the styles are scoped right here, it's not working. It won't apply this style to anything outside of this component. So I'm going to remove that, and then everything should look good again. Yep, it does. Now, if you have any kind of global styles that apply to common elements that appear in multiple different components, what you could do is create a global style sheet inside the assets. So I'm going to call this global.css, and you could add in some different styles here. For example, the body. I'm going to strip out the margin that we have over here. So I'll say the margin is 0. And then I'm going to do one for a paragraph tag, and I'll say font style is italic, like so, and that will affect every component. So if we come over here and refresh In fact, before we do this, we have to actually use these styles somewhere. Now, the way we use these global styles is by coming into the main.js file, and I'm just going to import, and I'm going to import that file. So it's // to say the current directory, then into the assets folder, then / global.css. And that's all we need to do. We're importing it into the main file, and now it's going to use these global CSS rules. So if I come over here, you can see that the paragraph now is italic, and also the margin has gone. So that's how we can use global styles as well. Again, you might want to override this style inside the component itself, in which you could do. So I could just say modal p, and then font style is going to be normal. So if I save again, it overrides that global style. So hopefully you've got a better understanding of how you can use these style tags and also scope them to that component only, and make global styles which apply to various common elements across your whole application.